Okay. Hey, welcome to How to Drive Business Growth with an Outstanding Digital Strategy. I am Jessica with Fistbump Media, and I'm here with Dan, our founder, resident expert extraordinaire of digital strategy for businesses and website owners. We are so glad you're here today in this webinar, and some of the things that we're going to be covering are just a nice broad picture of the key components to an effective digital strategy. Dan's going to walk us through those key pieces, and then we're going to see how these pieces combined will impact your bottom line for your business. And so we also have a live chat that is available, so you can type your questions in and have those questions answered as we're going, and if we don't get to them, we'll save some time at the end. So I'm going to turn it over to Dan, and he's going to talk about Fistbump Media and what we do.
Awesome. Thanks, Jessica. And yeah, just a note too, if you're on the webinar page, the live chat should be directly below the video stream here. So feel free anytime throughout this to drop some questions. We'll try to monitor those throughout the event and everything, but I'll also spend some time for some live Q&A here at the end as well too. So yeah, let me just jump over and I'm going to screen share. I got some presentation here I want to share with you guys. And obviously this is our webinar, How to Drive Business Growth with an Astounding Digital Strategy. The first thing I wanted to talk about a little bit was just about Fistbump Media and who we are and what we do. And really, Fistbump Media has kind of grown a lot out of my experience over the last 12 years or so as a blogger. I was just thinking about it. I built my first website just I think about 20 years ago, back in the 90s. So, but been a blogger for a long time, and we've been running Fistbump Media now for about 6 years, and it's really kind of stemmed out a lot of my experience as a blogger and what I did there to help kind of grow platform and take stories and really help amplify them online using digital media. So we focus a lot on just the digital media pieces and stuff too. You know, I'm not a huge fan when people say, "Oh, are you a web designer?" It's like, well, I use web design, but I'm not necessarily a web designer. You know, I use social media, but I'm not necessarily just a social media guy. Really, a lot of these are all big tools and stuff that we can use to help tell our stories, get them out there, and connect with people, potential customers, and whatever online. So it's kind of who we are here.
Great. Thanks, Dan. I love the story behind Fistbump Media, that we're all about telling the story and helping our viewers tell their stories as well. So can we dive into that just a little bit more about, can you explain that story, that core messaging that really is behind the story that drives each one of us in our business endeavors?
Absolutely, absolutely. I'm going to jump back to the slides here for that too. So, so really, this is the first big step when we talk about really trying to drive some business growth. You know, using the digital media stuff. You know, the first thing you need to do is really develop your kind of core message, a core message that resonates. And I love this quote. It's actually from one of my favorite authors, Donald Miller, who wrote a book about using story to connect your business with customers and everything too. But this is fantastic. I'm going to read this. I'm going to talk a little bit about it for a second. But he says, imagine your customer is a hitchhiker. You pull over to give him a ride, and the one burning question on his mind is simply, where are you going? But as he approaches, you roll down the window and start talking about your mission statement, or how your grandfather built this car with his bare hands, or how your road trip playlist is all 1980s alternative. This person doesn't care, right? You know, and I think when I think about that, a lot of us, we take our digital strategy for building our brand and building our business online and everything, and we start with this whole thing, I have to tell everybody what I'm all about, right? When really the average reader or user or anything, something like that on the other side of the screen, doesn't care as much about what you're about as much as they do about how you might be able to help them with their story, right? And kind of be a part of their story. One of my favorite stories about using and kind of digging into to our stories and how we can really kind of develop a core message that resonates is my father-in-law. Passed away earlier this year, but he's been a roofer for a long time, and I've been working with him on his digital strategy and everything, and I'm trying to get with them to say, hey, your story is really what connects you. He knows as a roofer, he's not the cheapest guy in town, but he does really, really good work. And I'm like, listen, if you're going to connect with people, you're not going to connect with people over being the lowest bid on their projects or anything like that. You need to connect with them. You need to give them a reason to want to connect with you and use your story, right? So I'm like, what is your story? He's like, I don't have a story, right? And then we get into this almost an argument about, like, I know you have a story. What is it? What really drives you? And he says, listen, I don't have a story. All I know is that when I was a kid, right? And I'm like, here it comes. Here comes the big story, right? So when I was a kid, he grew up like horse and buggy Amish and stuff up in Iowa. And he says, my father, when he helped me, when I helped him build things and stuff, he taught me to build things that would last. Right. So he says back then, if you wanted to get a roof done on your house, there were two kinds of people. He says there were your craftsmen and then there were your con men. He said it was, the con men were the ones that would come out, they'd give you a low bid, they'd just, take your deposit, maybe not even show up to do the work, or they'd use the cheapest, worst materials they could so that they could just get the project done really super, super cheap and not really care if it lasts very long. But you get a shoddy product, or if you got any product at all. He says then you're your craftsmen. All right, the craftsmen were the ones that did a really good job and built something that would last, just like my father always taught me. Right. He says the government steps in to try to deal with this issue of too many con men out there. So they set these regulations, and then they call it, if you want to get a roof on your house, you need to hire somebody with a license, right? A licensed roofing contractor. He said, but what they did then is they set the bar really low, okay? Or set the bar, it set a minimum bar, not necessarily really low, but they set a minimum bar for this is what you need to do in order to put a roof on somebody's house. What happened then is all the roofing contractors out there start living up to that minimum standard. Okay, so over time, you can get a roof on your house, but it's still not necessarily the best thing. He said, my question is, what happened to the craftsman, right? And I'm like, dude, that's your story, right? That's the piece that should really drive everything else that we do. But the tricky thing is, and we talk about developing a core message that resonates, I think people can connect with the idea that he's going to build a better quality product. He's not going to work to a minimum standard kind of thing. But that's the messaging that we try to use throughout the social media. But the really important part is, just like this quote from Donald Miller talks about, we're not talking about your mission statement. We're not talking about your grandfather and how he used to build roofs and stuff, whatever. It's how are we connecting with what that customer, a potential customer on the other end really needs. They need to figure out, hey, how am I going to have a roof over my home that's going to protect my family and protect my belongings, and that's going to last me a long time. I'm not going to have to replace it in 5 or 10 years, these kinds of things. So when we develop the core messaging that really resonates, we try to do this kind of combine. How do we combine, their story, the company story especially with the story of the potential customer on the other end. And when you can kind of figure out that space and find out where those two pieces really kind of intermingle, now you're starting to be able to kind of have a digital strategy that can really grow and build. And everything else is going to be based off of this. So that's kind of, I think that, a little bit there, just about, developing core message that resonates. We could really dig deep into this one, Jessica. We can go for a long time, but hopefully that kind of gives people an idea of the foundation where we start with building a digital strategy that'll drive business.
Yes, I think it does. And I think we could have a whole session just on finding that core message and tying it together with a customer's core message. I think of a real estate agent. You know, they want to sell homes, but the customer really wants a place to build memories. And so, you know, that could be a way that you can take your own story and tie it to a customer's desire and need on the inside. So I love that. That's awesome. So basically, once we figure out the core message, once we figure out our core message and how we can connect it to our customer's core message, what do we do then? What is the next piece of the puzzle for digital strategy?
Yeah, and that's perfect, right? So I'm going to go back to the slides. I got a few slides. I'm going to go back and forth here for a little bit to make sure I'm illustrating some things well for you guys. But really, you know, when it comes then to once you identify what that story is, the big thing then is using the digital media to really help amplify that. And that's, I think, one of the biggest things that I've seen over my experience over the years too, is that all the different pieces of digital media really serve as great tools to help amplify that story and get it out there. And there's a potential to reach a lot of people. Okay, but when we talk about amplifying the story, some of the elements that we're going to look at, and we're going to kind of dig into each of these a little bit over the session here too, is really the foundation. It starts with your website. Okay, the website is really the home of everything else that you do. The biggest piece that's really going to need to tell your story and and find ways to connect in with the story of your potential customers is going to be at the website, right? Social media is fantastic, but really ultimately your story shouldn't live there, right? That should be a tool to help kind of do something else to that really kind of gets people back to your website, because your website is the one piece that you really own, that you'll always own. And this is kind of related to website too, but we talk about content marketing, right? And I'll dig deeper into this as well too. But content marketing is doing things like blogging on your business website. A lot of people have confusion over what this really means or looks like, but ultimately, a lot of what drives everything else on this whole strategy is core content. It's really lives with your website. So having a content marketing strategy is going to be really kind of key, critical to what you're doing. Next is going to be SEO. Right. This is one of the traffic drivers, if you will. And I'll kind of talk about this in a second. But helping people answer their questions where they're asking them. Right. And these days, people are asking, one of the biggest places they're asking questions is Google. Right. So you need to make sure that what you do is optimized well to reach those people on the search engines. And then there's social media. Right, social media is huge. You think about especially the combined influence of Facebook and Twitter and LinkedIn, and so many other platforms that people can be on with their businesses. Pinterest, whatever. Right, the reach there and the possibility to be able to connect with potential customers out there too through social media is pretty massive. Right, so we'll talk about that as well too, and then email. Email, kind of bucket a little bit more into, you need to have their email address, right? And that's not something you just automatically have. Like, you can connect with people on social media without having personal information like an email address, right? So this is going to be a little bit more personal kind of contact and everything too. And I'll talk more about that in a minute, but having an email marketing strategy and how you use email to continue to connect with and reach and connect with the story and everything with everybody else is fantastic. So a lot of that, those are the pieces, those are the elements, right? Are really going to drive into different parts of what we kind of call the profit formula. Okay, and the profit formula is really what's going to drive revenue for your website. The profit formula looks like this, right? T times C times E equals R, right? So everybody out there who thinks that, what am I ever going to use algebra for? Here it is, okay? So this is your algebra lesson, but what these stand for is T for traffic, times your conversions times your economics equals your revenue. Okay, so a lot of these things in the digital strategy are pieces that we work with all the time, right? We focus a lot on how do we drive traffic to a website, or or to some form or whatever we want to use. But then also it's not just about driving traffic, right? A lot of people think too that if I have a digital media strategy, it's all about how do I get more visits on my website, and that's not necessarily always the case. Traffic is an element, right? But another element there is conversions, right? And the conversions is really about what do the people do once they're there on your website. And we talk about how central the website is to the strategy. Once you get people there, you need to be able to capture them. Getting 100,000 people to visit your website in a month is meaningless if none of them are actually taking the next step to really try to connect with you to become a potential customer, right? And then so traffic times conversions times E, the economics, and that's a piece that's not as much a part of the digital strategy that we're focusing on, but that's really the product pricing piece, right? That's what is it that you're selling, and what are the economics of that? Do you have control over your pricing factors and stuff too? But when you think about the bottom line revenue from a web strategy perspective, these are the three elements. It's your traffic times your conversions times your economics, your product pricing stuff too, that equals the revenue. So we look at all of these elements, and when we look at a digital strategy, like I said, we're not just looking to try to build a pretty website. We're looking to really try to impact your bottom line. How can we use the website to improve your conversions, which will then impact your revenue? So we look at a lot of that to make sure we're driving impact and real results. So.
Okay, that's great. Thank you for that brief overview of the key components. I love that you started with the foundation of any digital strategy is your website, because like you said, that's the real estate that you own. Anything we post out on social media is really owned by that platform. So if you can own your own real estate, so to speak, on the internet, I think that's a great place to start, and then to give us those key components. And I would be really excited to dive in deeper into each of those as individuals at some point, but today is all about an overview. So would you mind taking our viewers through the very first piece in that profit formula? Algebra was one of my favorite subjects. Don't ask me to do it now, but who knew that letters and math went hand in hand? So let's talk about traffic, shall we?
Yeah, sure, absolutely. Yeah, so traffic, this is really the first step, because like I said, it's not the whole thing. A lot of people get stuck on that and everything. It's not the whole thing, but it is a big, very important factor, right? So again, kind of going back to the slides here too, really popular social media guru, Gary Vaynerchuk. He actually started out with, I believe it was a wine business. He was like a wine distributor or something, and his big thing is how he used social media to really kind of grow his business. So now he's got this whole Vayner Media, which really just helps a lot of other people to focus on how they can use social media to kind of grow their brands and business stuff too. But the first element here that I want to talk about with the traffic strategies has to do with this content marketing piece, right? And he says some great stuff here too about this. He says, if you're not putting out relevant content in relevant places, you don't exist, right? And really what he means by that is that when it comes to even search and social media and everywhere else, right? Really the key thing that drives that for people is content. Even for example, we'll talk about social media more in just a second, but when you look at social media and say on Facebook, some of the biggest things that drive people through Facebook is education and entertainment, right? I watch my wife on her phone, later in the evenings, and she's just laughing. It's, and videos and stuff too. And I've seen people really build big brands, like comedians and stuff, just strictly based on, what they're doing on Facebook, right? Educational information, those are the types of things that really people end up sharing. I was even looking on Facebook just a little bit earlier today. My sister-in-law shared a piece of content. I was like, oh yeah, that's kind of a situation my wife and I are into with our kids or something. So I shared that with my wife, but it was an educational piece, right? But really, regardless, there's a lot of stuff to this. But this is all about the content that you're building that's going to be a resource to people. This is why blogging for businesses is such, I think, a critical part, because you're not just going to dump a few pages onto a website and expect that that's going to cover everything that everybody wants to know. I think especially as things like voice search start to get more popular, people are going to places like Google to ask questions, right? And I see such a huge spike in searches being done that are not just simple keywords like, insert your industry name and insert your city here. People are asking questions about, you mentioned real estate, how do I price my home right? And those are questions that you could be answering with things like blog posts, right? That really hit to the pieces that, that people want to know, right? And that stuff is great for search. It's great for social media, but having a content strategy and using content marketing and business blogging stuff, to communicate those ideas and be a thought leader in your industry is really critical to what we're doing. The next piece I want to talk about with when it comes to traffic strategies is SEO, right? And here's a good example too, right? This roofer, I'm working with, you heard me tell a little story about him earlier and stuff. We were working on some blogging ideas and stuff, and one of the blog posts that we had put out there was a blog post, what to expect during roof repair and replacement, right? We put it out there, we published it, not too long after that. I wasn't really thinking much of it, but I saw a huge spike in traffic in the Google Analytics and stuff. And when I dug in to figure out where it was coming from, it was coming from organic searches, which means, it's not paid ads or anything like that on Google, but it was coming from Google. And specifically using keyword terms like roof replacement, what to expect, right? This is a good example of the kinds of questions that people are asking, search engines and whatnot, right? So I was like, oh, okay. Well, as soon as I saw the keyword phrases that were popping up and driving a lot of the search results, I instantly knew. It's like, yeah, well, we published a blog post about that. What I didn't know yet and I had to go actually do the search to see it, was that in which what you're looking at on the screen is that Google is putting things into the search engine world. We call this in position 0, right? You get these snippets basically that are answering questions, right? This list contains some things you can expect during roof repair and replacement. Right, and what they did is they tagged our blog post as the best answer to that question. So they put that little snippet, the list of the things that we were saying you need to be thinking about, right? They put that snippet above even position number 1, and you can see on the screenshot too that our blog post is organically ranking at number 2 for that answering that question. But even better than number 1 above us, we got the snippet up there. Right? So search engine optimization is a really big thing too. And this is a great example because it builds off of that content marketing piece, right? This is not something that would have happened to us had we not been doing the content marketing strategy, right? And doing the blogging. But when we show up for these kinds of results and stuff, we're not only proving to search engines and stuff like that too, but we're also proving to potential customers and readers and stuff that we're a thought leader, we're an expert on this subject and stuff. And this kind of thing builds a great deal of credibility because we've got the right answers for people. And I can tell you, not a lot of other bloggers or not a lot of other roofers in town are doing that same kind of thing. So it can really help you stand out among your competition and set yourself ahead as really a leader. And then the next piece with traffic strategies is we'll talk about social media, right? And one big thing I want to point out with this chart is really just it's about the percentage currently following brands on social media, right? Millennials and Gen X primarily, you got about 50% almost of each of those generations. A lot of spending power right there, right? Are currently following brands on social media, right? And that's a big deal because that just shows how big the potential audience is, right? So the point is that if you're not doing social media as a business, as a brand, right, you're missing out on a great deal of opportunity. And then when you're doing social media, again, think about what we were just talking about earlier with the whole story piece and stuff, right? I love that Donald Miller quote, right? So I think there's a couple of things that you want to do, but one of them is certainly not just be hey, here's my mission statement, right? People don't want to see a tweet about your mission statement. They don't really care, right? So how can you use the social media to kind of inject yourself into the stories of the people who are on the other end, right? So you think of Amos the roofer, and a lot of what we try to do in our digital strategy with social media too is set this tone for craftsmanship, right? And how to build things better. So even on their Facebook page, we may even share some stuff too about home improvement that may not even be about your roof, but are about craftsmanship and doing things well, right? And so we try to find ways like that, and really kind of being a part of, how can you protect your home, when a hurricane comes? We're down in Florida, so that's a big deal for us. And how can you improve the curb appeal of your house? Stuff like that too. These are the things that readers on the other end are thinking about. So that's how we try to use social media and stuff too, as a way to try to drive traffic to the website. So yeah, that's that with the traffic strategies.
Okay, great. So there's basically 3 basic ways that we generate traffic. And so now that we know about the first part of the algebraic equation for the profit formula, can you talk us through the second step, the conversion aspects? Because You're right, you can have all the traffic in the world, but if someone doesn't, I kind of see that traffic as you're holding out your hand saying, hi, I'd like to get to know you. But if someone doesn't then reciprocate, then I guess let's talk about conversion to get someone to reciprocate back, because that's really what it is about, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I love that too, the whole kind of reaching out your hand and everything, right? And being there. You're not going to get somebody to shake your hand if you're not reaching your hand out. So the traffic is certainly a huge driver in what we're doing. But then, like I said, once they get there to your website or whatever you're trying to drive them to, it's really kind of meaningless unless you can convert them, right? It's the big thing is how then do you move them from being just a website visitor to initiating conversation with you and maybe picking up the phone, or something along those lines. So with that, there's a couple of things too. I'm going to look at the website, right? Because this is where really primarily you're going to try to drive people to your website. Because like I said early on, this is your home for everything that you do. Okay. So a couple of elements too, and this is that Sunshine Roofing, the top portion of their homepage. A couple of things I want to kind of point out that we're doing here too. One is contact information, man. Contact information has always got to be very readily available no matter what, right? You scroll down the page, and then one of the things we like to do with a lot of websites, there are some exceptions and stuff too, but if you were to visit this website, one thing you'll see is that top header bar, with the phone number and the email address are stuck to the top of the page, right? It's just going to be a fixed header up there. So no matter where you are, you're always going to see that information. That stuff is clickable. It's there on mobile, so you can just if you're searching from your mobile phone, you find them. You tap on that phone number right there and stuff too. It's always going to be right at the top of the page. So that's a big deal. Is that from a website perspective, you always need to make sure that people know how to contact you, no matter where they're at. It's really important that you don't make people work harder than they have to figure out how to get in touch with you. The second they have to start figuring out, like, oh, where do I go to find the phone number, then you're going to lose them, right? So it's important that there's never any question about where that is. The next piece is just strong calls to action, and these are going to be things too that you always want to make sure, usually pretty visible and consistently built well across the website, right? So in this case, you got the connect with a roofing consultant. Click on the button for a free consult, right? That free thing obviously helps kind of entice them to, it's like, oh, okay, it's not going to cost me anything to take this next step, right? So find ways to encourage them to take that next step. Another big thing is too, and this is getting really popular, is this online chat, right? So we started experimenting with this too, not only with ourselves, Fistbump Media too, but then with a few other clients, and it's really been a pretty great tool, because what happens sometimes is if somebody's looking at your website, and here's the thing, if you think about it, and you're really honest, you're not going to be able to answer every question that they might have in their mind just right away. And you may have an answer there somewhere, right? But they might have to dig a little bit for it, right? So I'm not going to, like in the screen that you're looking at, just the home page above the fold, right? Just the top portion of the screen doesn't answer every question, obviously, right? They may still have some questions. What do I expect during a roof repair or replace, for example, right? So the online chat is a great tool because it makes it very easy. It's a low barrier to try to overcome for people, to have that they're on the site for 30 seconds or a minute or whatever too. And this little thing pops up and just says, hey, we're here to help if you need anything, right? And they could go, yeah, okay, so I was looking for whatever my question is, and they could type, how long does a metal roof last, and they can type in that question. And what happens is there's a couple of things. Typically, when you have an online chat like this on your website, it increases the amount of time that people end up spending on your website, which is a great thing also too for your search engine optimization, right? The longer people spend on your website on average, Google knows that information. They knows how long your people are spending on your site. It helps send a signal back to them that your website is valued because people were spending more time there, right? But also helps make those connections and stuff too. And I've noticed this with just even with our own stuff with Fistbump Media, is that I've made several sales just over online chat because somebody was on the website, they had a question they weren't finding an answer to, they hit me up on the chat, and I answered that question and was able to convert them into a customer, right? So it's a great sales opportunity to capture them. If they felt like I didn't answer their question and I didn't have a very easy method for them to be able to find the answer to that question, like the online chat, they may have just bounced and gone away, and I never would have had that customer, right? So these are all, I think, really critical and important things. And there's a lot of other stuff we can do as well too. But I think fundamentally speaking, these are probably some of the most important things that we can be doing on a website to make sure that we're trying to capture those people and convert them into that next step, because that's always what you should be thinking about is how do I move somebody from being that visitor to taking some next step where they're getting in touch with me somehow, right? And from there, The next big piece of the conversion strategies is email. Okay, and I love this quote from David Newman, who's a pretty popular marketer. Says email has an ability many channels don't, creating valuable personal touches at scale. Okay, and I'm gonna break this down real quick too, right? Everybody gets on the big, ride the big wave of social media and stuff. Oh, I got to be on the social media. That's where I'm going to connect with customers and stuff like that too, right? And they do, right? But what a lot of people don't realize is the one channel that really provides some of the highest return on investment over all the social media and everything else is email, right? So email has this ability that you can connect really in this whole idea of valuable personal touches, right? It's probably the most direct, most personal, most intimate way that you can communicate digitally with your client, right? Because if I send out an email, even if it's the same email that goes to 5,000 people, it's not to 5,000 people when it's from me to you in your inbox, right? That is a one-on-one communication between you and me. And then there might be, and that's the scale piece, right? I can do very similar things and stuff like that too in a large scale and replicate it and stuff too. But it's that one-on-one communication, right? So it's that opportunity then to say, hey, if all I captured from you when you visited my website was your email address, I can send you a note, follow up, and you and I can have a one-on-one conversation, and we can see where this thing goes. Maybe there's a way I can help you, maybe there isn't, but you and I, we can do that, and I can create value that way in a very personal way with them stuff too. So I'm also noticing just in the chat too, the folks at Camp Work saying we were talking about traffic and stuff too. They said just not just the number of views, but number of quality views. And absolutely, I agree. And one point about that too as well is I've noticed. We kind of come back to the website piece stuff, right? I've noticed when I look at stuff digitally, right? I look at a lot of the analytics. I let the analytics really try to drive me for what people are doing, right? And I've seen people spend a lot of money, for example, on Google Ads. I'm not trying to poo-poo Google Ads in general, right? They're fantastic and they can actually help you achieve some goals and stuff too. But I've seen some instances for some people where they spend a lot of money on something like that, and it drives a lot of traffic, right? So you get a lot of visits to the website, but then a lot of those visits coming from that channel may be hitting a really high bounce rate, right? So they're hit that one page, they're gone. They're spending only 5 seconds on the website, right? So that's not good quality traffic, because when you look at that, let me come back here. When you look at that equation there, right? It's not just about the traffic, right? It's about what that traffic does. It's the conversion rate. It's the economics. There are 2 other factors there. I'd rather try to drive less traffic that's good quality traffic than I would to just drive a ton of traffic that's not even going to convert, right? So that's why things like these conversion strategies and stuff like that are too important. Make sure that the website is set so that you can capture them. Make sure there's some way that if you get their email address somehow, that you can make sure you're communicating with them and stuff too, because that's part of that digital strategy is how am I communicating with them afterwards and stuff too as well. I see a question out there too from Tammy. How do the strategies work for blogs that are not businesses such as a roofing business? I might jump back to that question here in just a little bit, but for now, that's we've talked about traffic. We've talked about conversion strategies. So that's good. We've kind of hit those first two pieces of that equation. So,
which is awesome. That's you can't have your end goal, which for businesses is revenue. And just want to touch on Tammy's question. I think the revenue for bloggers is probably lives that you are involved in touching. And so that's the revenue that we're kind of going for there. But that we come back to that again. But so we just still need to talk about that third piece of the equation, that's economics. And let's dive into that.
All right, cool. So yeah, and then back over to the slides here too. So yeah, traffic is a big thing. Conversion rate is a big thing. But then there's the economics. And I love this quote too from Seth Godin, super guru marketer, right? He says, perhaps the reason price is all your customers care about is because you haven't given them anything else to care about, right? And I love this because it relates so much to just even some of the other digital strategy pieces too. When I talk about Amos the roofer, and he knows he's not the cheapest guy in town, right? So how important is it that he's giving people a reason to care about more than just price, right? And I think this is a big thing too from an economic strategy, right? Is pricing is the one thing that really I can't do a lot about when it comes to the revenue equation and stuff like that. I can drive traffic, I can help conversion stuff too. Pricing is really kind of up to the business side itself, and how that's built. But really, we can overcome higher prices. So I think one thing to consider, when we're looking at the economics side of this revenue equation, right? One thing to consider there is really, are your prices too low? If your prices are something that you have control over, right? Can you raise your prices because you feel like you provide a much superior product than a lot of your competitors do? And if you do, how do we then overcome that, right? How do we make sure that people care about the things, about the real reasons, we're trying to do this and help them out and stuff too, so the price isn't really as much of a factor, right? Ultimately in the end, you don't want your customers even really thinking about price, and that doesn't mean, jack up your price so high that, that you're just kind of price yourself out of the market and stuff too. But I see a lot of people, a lot of clients and stuff too, that go higher end with their products and stuff too, because they can charge more for them. But then really we try to make sure we leverage that too throughout a lot of the rest of the digital storytelling and stuff too, to make sure that the people care more about the other reasons and not just the price.
Okay, great. Thank you. So now that we have that basic understanding of the profit formula, what do we do? How do we take this really amazing fire hydrant amount of information and put it into an actionable plan that takes us from, okay, so yeah, I know that I need to have some content marketing, and I know I need to be out there on social media, and I know I need to update my website and everything. So it feels overwhelming and it feels like I don't know where to begin. But where can we start? What's a way that we can take this and create a plan?
Right, and that's great. All right, so this is then kind of where we go. Let me jump back to the slides again from here. Right, so we would talk about that profit formula. Traffic. I think there's some simple things that you could do. Right, but really the big piece is going to be that you have to have the strategy, right? The strategy that's really going to kind of say, all right, these are the steps that I'm going to take. This is how I want to use search engines. I want to try to break into search engines and drive some traffic that way. This is how I'm going to use social media. This is how I'm going to use content marketing. From a basic core level, really a lot of the traffic depends on content. Okay, so the content is critically important because that feeds search engines, that feeds social media, right? So what are you doing about that content marketing strategy? What are some of the things that you can and should be blogging about, right? Maybe that you're not, right? And there are ways to dig in and try to figure out what are the questions that people are asking. You know, a lot of those conversations are happening online all over the place, right? You know, places like Quora, for example, you know, big website where it's all about questions and answers. You know, you can type in certain terms and see what questions people are asking, right? You know, and if you can try to provide answers to those same kinds of questions, those kinds of things can turn into blog posts and stuff too. That can really drive traffic not only through search engines but through social media and so on, right? You know, as far as what to do, then, you know, conversions is obviously then the other really big deal that I know, you know, we're really trying to focus on. You know, is then how can we improve the website, right? And one of the things I love to do when it comes to dealing with conversions is I love to do what we call A/B split testing, right? You know, so there's some ways, without getting too technical and stuff, right? You know, that you know, if I look at that the roofing company homepage, and we've got, you know, a big yellow button, you know, a big yellow orange-ish kind of color button on there. You know, how often does that click through, right? But, you know, I can set it up so that maybe I create a duplicate copy of that page, right? And maybe that, instead of a yellow orange button, maybe it's a big blue button, right? You know, and that's the only difference, right? You know, and test details of you know, but the differences between those, right? So I can say, well, the blue button gets clicked on a lot more than the orange yellow button does, you know. But ultimately, really, what I'm trying to get at here too is it's really about developing a plan that's going to drive growth over time, right? And I love this. Peter Drucker, management specialist, you know, for a long time, you know, had once said, "What gets measured gets managed," right? And I love the wisdom behind that too. And really everything that you need to do, you need to be measuring, right? You need to be figuring out, you know, what is going to you know, provide better results than what I'm getting right now. And I don't like to measure against, you know, what is this roofing company doing compared to, you know, its competitor roofing company. What is this roofing company doing right now, and how can we improve that, right? How can we improve that number to get better at it? So how can we get more clicks on this button on the screen, or how can we get more clicks over to the website from this search engine result or from this social media post and stuff, right? You know, so it's really all about measuring everything that you do, watching those analytics, and then continue to make decisions over time, month after month. You know, how can we achieve this? Then how can we improve on that? And testing things to see what's going to get you better results than what you got before. So, but really, measurement is the big piece that really drives a lot of that kind of ongoing growth. You know, so part of the where you start is just even taking a look at what are you measuring at right now for everything that you're doing, right? You know, how many visits are you getting on your website? Well, once you figure out how many visits you're getting on your website, how many of them are filling out the contact form or whatever it is that's gonna, you know, get you their contact information and stuff. What's that ratio? And now you know where to start building up from there.
And then do you recommend just maybe making one change at a time? Say a website owner's goal, blogger, business owner, is to get more people to fill out that contact information. So what that person owner would want to do is to focus on, okay, let's change the color. Maybe that's all it is. Maybe my wording needs to be a little bit more, you know, enticing, or change it to more active verbs and specific nouns. That type of so we want to pick one area, give it some time, and before we make changes again. Yep,
exactly. Yeah, and I've actually just recently finished some certification stuff on an idea for web design called growth-driven design. And one of the things that really is confirmed for me too is this whole idea of you know, really start basic, right? You don't need to have the big, huge, massive, you know, $10,000 website or anything like that, right? Start basic. Start with what you need. Understanding your users and where they're at and stuff too, right? But then really, a website is not just a one-time build it and put it out there and you're done kind of thing. It's a constant How do I continue to improve this over time, kind of thing. So yeah, don't overwhelm the system, right? With trying to do too much all at once and go, okay, I want to test these 20 things this month, right? It's not about that. Yeah, take a handful of things, but I think the most important thing is just be very intentional about it, right? Let's build a wish list of the kinds of things that you want to make sure we're trying to do. What's going to drive some of the biggest impact and results? Those are some pretty simple conversations that you and I and business or whoever and stuff like that can kind of sit around a table or something like that, or a Google Hangout or something like that, and say, based on what we're seeing right now in today's analytics, what are some of the things that we want to make sure we're driving the most impact to? And those are things, I can tell you, I dig into the data even for Fistbump Media quite a bit, and I see that stuff. I can tell you what my conversion rates are from website visitors to leads that we have contact information for, and then how many of those leads then convert into orders, and stuff too. And so I know those rates, right? But knowing those rates then helps me determine, okay, what's the next step? What's going to be the most important thing for me to focus on? Do I feel like my ratio of website visitors to becoming a lead is too low? Because if that's way too low, then it doesn't matter how many of those leads I convert into sales, that's still going to be a really low number. So I think looking at analytics will really help kind of drive some of those kinds of details.
Okay, great. Thank you. It's been a great overview. Do we have any more questions in the live chat box?
Yeah, I think the other one, we could probably just jump back to this real quick too, because I do have some thoughts on it, is Tammy's question about how do the strategies work for blogs that are not businesses, such as roofing businesses. And I think this is a tricky thing too, right? Because I've been a blogger for a long time, but I think building a blog is a lot like building a business, right? It's really the same principles and ideas, because at the core of it all, whether you're a roofing company or a faith-based blogger, you're building a brand, right? And as a blogger, really the brand is you, right? So you're doing a lot of the same stuff to try to drive the traffic. You need to be thinking about, if you want to build this stuff, right, and grow your audience, you need to be maybe a little more strategic about, so what are some of the blog posts that you're writing? Are you answering questions on your blog that people are really asking about what's going on in society today? Or if it's a fashion blog, people are asking about what the current clothes trends are. So, whatever kind of blog it is. But the bottom line is ultimately I think the big shift there is thinking about your blog as if it is a business, right? You may not do some of the things at the same scale that a roofing company may, because a roofing company is obviously going to have a little bit more budget to do stuff like that. But as a blog, you're still taking the same kinds of steps to try to grow your brand. You're still using the same kinds of strategies and tactics to, how do I, when visitors come to my website, how do I get them on my email list to be a subscriber? Because one day I might write a book, and I want to make sure all those people who visit my website, as many of them as possible, will get that email from me telling them to go buy my book when it's ready. So it's the same kind of tactics and stuff, right? But there's just this. I think the biggest thing is making a shift, because I think a lot of bloggers are writers. They care more about writing, which is more of an art, right? And art is not business. So I think that's sometimes, but part of it is if you want to grow it, then you need to start thinking about your blog as a business and really apply the same exact ideas and tactics, maybe just a slightly different scale.
But not to overwhelm yourself. If you're a blogger, writer, and you, I think we need to come back, and I'm speaking from that. That's what I do, as well as work with Fistbump Media. But just come back to my core message is this, and it serves other people. And if you can tap into that and start asking, what kind of questions was I asking when I was in that place, that type of a thing, and then start creating content that addresses that, I think is a place to start for bloggers and writers that are more ministry based rather than business based. But I do believe that that a lot of these business principles churches can apply, ministries can apply, because ministries are about people, just as businesses are about people. Yep. And so I think this has been a really fantastic overview of digital strategy. We've talked about core message, we've talked about amplification, the profit formula, and then measurable experimentation. And it's just been a really great hour. We're coming to the end. We have about 5 minutes left. Dan, do you have any further thoughts for our viewers?
Yeah, and I'll just point out too, because you mentioned it, you know, churches, nonprofits, things like that stuff, right? You know, it's the same thing. You know, a lot of, you know, I've got a lot of experience working with some nonprofits in the past too, where you know, we've done things like take a blogging team on a trip to Haiti and then come back and launch a social media campaign that invited people into the story, you know, so they could be a part of making a difference in, you know, in somebody's life and stuff. And it was just, it was really fascinating. So, you know, a lot of these ideas aren't necessarily, like you say, applicable to just for-profit businesses, right? Nonprofits, you know, benefit from these ideas. Writers, bloggers, because again, like I said, you know, it's just really a lot of the same kind of core principles and ideas and stuff that drive growth and drive the results. Okay,
great. Thank you. So if you want to visit any more with Dan or I, we're available. My email address is jessicav@fistbumpmedia.com. And if you want to direct your questions to me, that would be great. And then we wanted to offer just a special offer for those that have registered a deep dive audit of your website, just as a thank you for joining us today. That's normally a $250 service, and we want to offer it to you as a thank you gift for signing up for this webinar. So you can, again, if you're interested in that, just shoot me an email, Jessica, V as in Victor, @fistbumpmedia.com. So thank you all so much for being here. It was a pleasure to serve you in this way. So, and thank you, Dan, for sharing your expertise. It was awesome and wonderful.
Awesome. Thanks, Jessica, for hosting. Thank you, everybody.
Bye.